Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. They say the dead don't speak, but I know better now. Last week, I drove 16 hours straight to Breakwater Pier in Maine because of a text message from my brother. The problem is, my brother died 3 years ago. The message was simple. Meet me where the boats sleep. Midnight. Come alone. I should have deleted it, should have blocked the number. But the area code, 207, that was Breakwater. And the way it was written, only Jake called the marina where the boats sleep. It's what he used to say when we were kids visiting our grandpa's fishing cabin every summer. So here's the thing. And I need you to tell me in the comments if I'm losing my mind. Because what happened that night at Breakwater Pier, it changed everything I thought I knew about death, about reality, about the thin line between our world and whatever waits on the other side. If you're listening to this late at night, maybe grab something comforting. Because once I tell you about the ferryman, you might not sleep the same way again. The story begins now. The GPS kept trying to reroute me away from Breakwater. Every few miles, that synthetic voice would chime in, recalculating, make a U-turn when possible. But I kept driving north on Route 1, watching the October fog roll in thicker with each passing hour. I hadn't been back to Maine since Jake's funeral. 3 years of avoiding every memory. Every place that reminded me of him. Now here I was, white-knuckling the steering wheel of my Honda Civic at 11 p.m., chasing what had to be someone's sick joke. The radio started cutting out around Kennebunkport. Static filled the car, broken only by whispers of old jazz stations that shouldn't have reached this far north. I recognized one of the songs, Beyond the Sea, the Bobby Darin version. Jake used to whistle it constantly when we went fishing. My hands started shaking. I pulled over at a rest stop to check my phone again. The message was still there. Sent from Jake's old number. The one I'd kept paying for because I couldn't bear to disconnect it. Sometimes I'd call just to hear his voicemail. Hey, you've reached Jake. I'm probably out on the water. Leave a message and I'll hit you back when I dock. But this wasn't a voicemail. This was a text. Sent 3 days ago at exactly 11:47 p.m. I scrolled through our old conversations. Hundreds of messages frozen in time. The last one from him, sent the morning he died. Heading out early today, fish are biting at the deep channel. Love you, little bro. He never came back from that trip. They found his boat drifting near Seal Point, motor still running. His coffee still warm in the thermos. No sign of Jake. The Coast Guard searched for 2 weeks before calling it off. Likely swept out by a rogue wave, they said. But the ocean was glass calm that day. Everyone who knew the water said so. I started the car again, 23 miles to Breakwater. The fog got so thick I could barely see the road lines. My headlights created a tunnel of white, like driving through cotton. Other cars disappeared completely. It felt like I was the only person left in the world. Just me and the growing knot in my stomach. Then I saw the sign, Breakwater Pier, 5 miles. My phone buzzed. Another text. Same number. Almost here? The tide is perfect tonight. I nearly drove off the road. That phrase, the tide is perfect. Jake said it every time conditions were just right for night fishing. No one else knew that. It wasn't something you'd guess. 3 more miles. The fog began to smell different. Salt and something else. Something organic and old. Like seaweed left to rot in the sun, but colder somehow. My windows started fogging up from the inside. I cranked the defroster, but it barely helped. 2 miles. I could hear the ocean now, waves breaking against rocks. But the sound was wrong, too rhythmic, too deliberate, like breathing. 1 mile. The radio sparked to life, just for a second. A voice, barely audible through the static. Keeper of passages, coin for the crossing, midnight at the pier. Then silence. I pulled into the Breakwater Marina parking lot at 11:51 p.m., 9 minutes to midnight. The place was completely deserted. Not unusual for October, but still unsettling. Row after row of empty slips where summer boats used to bob. Only a few year-round vessels remained. Dark shapes barely visible through the fog. I sat in the car for a minute, engine running, trying to convince myself to leave. This was insane. Someone was playing a cruel prank. Had to be. Maybe one of Jake's old fishing buddies who knew our inside jokes. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. Those guys would never do something this twisted. 11:54 p.m. I turned off the engine. The silence rushed in, broken only by the sound of water lapping against the pier. No wind, no birds. Even the usual marina sounds, creaking ropes, clanging halyards, were absent. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment, checked that my phone was fully charged, and stepped out into the fog. The wooden pier stretched out before me, disappearing into the white wall after about 30 feet. My footsteps echoed strangely, like the sound was coming from below the boards rather than above. The fog was so thick I could taste it. Salt and metal and something else that made my throat tight. I walked slowly, flashlight beam sweeping side to side. The boats I passed were familiar. The Mary Catherine, the Seaside Dream, the Fortunate Son. All empty, all dark. Their windows reflected my flashlight back at me like dead eyes. Then I reached Slip 47, Jake's old spot. A boat was there. Not just any boat. Jake's boat. The second chance. But that was impossible. The second chance was never recovered. It went down with... The boat looked perfect. No barnacles, no wear. The blue paint gleamed like it was fresh from the shop. Even the name painted on the stern looked newly done. Jake's careful lettering exactly as I remembered. 11:58 p.m. Movement on the deck. A shadow shifting near the wheel. My throat went dry. I wanted to call out, but what would I say? What do you say to a ghost? The shadow turned, stepped into the dim circle of my flashlight. It wasn't Jake. The man on the boat was old, older than anyone I'd ever seen still working the docks. His face was weathered like driftwood, deep lines carved by salt and time. He wore an ancient peacoat that might have been navy blue once but had faded to the color of deep water. His eyes. God, his eyes were like looking into tide pools at night, dark and deeper than they should be. "Right on time," he said. His voice sounded like waves pulling back over gravel. "Who are you?" My own voice cracked. "What are you doing on my brother's boat?" He smiled, but it wasn't comforting. "Your brother sent me, said you'd come if he asked proper. My brother is dead." "Yeah?" "That old Maine agreement." "That he is. Been ferrying souls across the water for 3 years now. Good at it, too. Natural talent for reading the tides." I took a step back. The pier board creaked under my weight, but it sounded like laughter. "You're insane." "Maybe so." He pulled out an old pocket watch, the kind with a chain. "But it's midnight now, and promises made to the dead, well, they got weight to them. Your brother worked hard to arrange this meeting. Least you can do is hear him out." "Hear him out? He's dead." "Dead don't mean gone, boy. Not here. Not at Breakwater." He gestured to the fog around us. This place, it's what you might call thin. Border territory. Your brother learned that when he crossed over. Some folks, they got unfinished business. Can't rest proper till it's sorted. My hands were shaking again. You're saying Jake is... what, a ghost? Ghost is your word, not mine. I just ferry them that needs ferrying. Been doing it since before your grandfather's grandfather was born. Breakwater Pier. It's always been a crossing place. Indians knew it. First settlers knew it. Your brother knows it now. He stepped aside, revealing the boat's cabin. The door was open. Inside, I could see a soft golden light, like oil lamps but steadier, and a shadow, human-shaped, waiting. He can't come up on the pier, the old man said. Rules are rules, but you can go to him, just for a while, till the tide turns. This is crazy. Lots of things are crazy till they ain't. He checked his watch again. You got 43 minutes. Tide turns at 12:43. After that, well, the crossing closes till next month. Your choice, boy. But choose quick. Time moves different on the water. I looked at the cabin again. The shadow shifted. Raised what might have been a hand. My heart hammered against my ribs. What would you do? Seriously, tell me in the comments. Would you get on that boat? Because I did. The moment my foot touched the deck, everything changed. The fog pulled back like curtains. The air tasted different, older, full of memories. And the boat, it hummed under my feet. Not like an engine, like something alive. Jake, I called out. In here, little bro. That voice, oh God, that voice. It was him, really him. I stumbled towards the cabin, legs barely working. The golden light grew brighter as I approached. And there, sitting at the small table where we used to play cards during storms, was my brother. He looked not alive exactly, but not dead either. Solid but translucent, like looking at someone through amber. He smiled, that crooked smile that used to drive girls crazy. Hey Matt, thanks for coming. I collapsed into the chair across from him. Up close, I could see through him to the wall behind. Could see the water droplets on his jacket that never fell. Could see the way his edges blurred if I didn't look directly at him. This isn't real. Real as it needs to be. He leaned forward. I'm sorry about the cryptic message. Turns out there are rules about contacting the living. Can't just call you up and chat. Has to be important. Has to be necessary. Necessary for what? His expression darkened. To warn you about the thing that killed me. The thing that's been killing fishermen at Breakwater for decades. Maybe longer. Jake, you fell overboard. The Coast Guard said the Coast Guard found what it wanted them to find. He stood up, paced to the window. Outside, the fog swirled in patterns that hurt to follow. I didn't fall, Matt. I was taken. Pulled under by something that shouldn't exist. Something that feeds when the conditions are right. Feeds on us, on fishermen, on anyone who goes out past the break when the tide runs black. He turned back to me. It's why Grandpa never let us night fish during spring tides. Why the old-timers have all those rules about when to stay in port. They know. They've always known. Then why didn't you know? Why did you go out? Pain flickered across his face. Because I was cocky. Thought the old stories were just superstition. Went out alone during a black tide because the fishing report said the tuna were running. He laughed, bitter and hollow. Caught something, all right. But it wasn't tuna. What was it? I don't know. Nobody knows. We just call it the hunger. Been here since before people probably. Lives in the deep channel. Sleeps mostly. But when the conditions are perfect, Full moon, spring tide, water temperature just so, it wakes up and it feeds. So you're warning me not to go fishing at night? Done. Warning received. No, Matt, I'm warning you because it's happening again. Tonight. The conditions are perfect, and there's a boat out there right now, the Sarah's Dream. Tom Whelan's boy took her out 2 hours ago. Didn't listen to his dad about the black tide. He's heading for the deep channel. I stood up so fast the chair fell over. We have to warn him. Call the Coast Guard. With what? A ghost story? Jake shook his head. They'd laugh. Maybe send a boat out in the morning to humor you. By then, he didn't finish. So what do I do? You go get him. Take the second chance. She knows the way. I'll guide you best I can, but... He glanced at something I couldn't see. I can't go past the break. That's living water. But I can get you close. Jake, I haven't piloted a boat in years. You remember, I taught you good. He moved to the wheel, hands hovering over but not quite touching it. Besides, she wants to go. Been waiting 3 years to finish her last trip. Outside, the ferryman called out, 28 minutes? Jake's form flickered. Please, Matt, I couldn't save myself. But maybe this is why I'm still here, to save someone else, through you. I thought about some kid out there in the dark. Thought about another family getting that call. Another brother lost to the water. Show me the way. The moment I took the wheel, the second chance responded like a living thing. The engine started without me turning a key, a deep, steady rumble that felt more like a heartbeat than machinery. Jake stood beside me, translucent hands pointing the way. Ease her out slow. The fog's thick, but she knows these waters. I reversed out of the slip, muscle memory taking over. How many times had Jake taught me this exact maneuver? Small movements, little bro. Let the boat do the work. The ferryman watched from the pier, checking his pocket watch. As we passed, he called out, Stay in the channel markers. Don't let the water sing to you. And whatever you do, don't look down when you reach the break. What does that mean? I shouted back, but he was already fading into the fog. We motored through the marina, past the breakwater, into open ocean. The fog was so thick I couldn't see the bow, but somehow I knew where to go. Jake pointed into the white void. 3 degrees starboard. Feel how the water changes? That's the current from the deep channel. Follow it, but don't trust it. The boat moved like she was eager, like she'd been waiting for this. I could feel Jake beside me, cold as winter wind but comforting somehow. Real or not, I wasn't alone. Tell me about that night, I said. What really happened? Jake was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was steadier than I expected. I was following a school of bluefin, big ones. The kind that make your whole season. They were running deeper than usual, right along the channel edge. I should have known something was off. The fog began to thin, not clearing exactly, just pulling back enough to see maybe 50 feet ahead. The water was black glass, not a ripple anywhere. No wind, no waves, nothing. Then I saw it, Jake continued. The water, it turned wrong, like oil but alive, moving against the current, moving with purpose. The fish, thousands of them, swimming in circles, not fleeing, just circling like they were caught in something. A whirlpool. No, something underneath, something big. His form flickered. I tried to reverse, but the engine died. Electronics went haywire. GPS showing coordinates that don't exist. Radio speaking in languages I didn't recognize. And the water. We were moving faster now. The boat seemed to know the urgency. In the distance, barely visible, a small light bobbed on the water. There, I pointed. That must be the Sarah's dream. Careful, Jake warned. Look at the water around her. I looked and immediately wished I hadn't. The ocean around the distant boat was wrong. It moved in patterns that made my eyes water, spirals within spirals, geometries that shouldn't exist in nature, and beneath the surface, shadows, massive, circling. Oh God, don't stop, don't slow down, and whatever happens, don't look directly at it when it surfaces. When what surfaces? But I knew. Deep in my gut, I knew. The hunger. The thing that took my brother. It was down there, waking up, getting ready to feed. The radio crackled to life. Static at first, then a young voice, terrified. Mayday! Mayday! This is the Sarah's dream. Something's wrong with the water. My engine's dead. Someone, please. I grabbed the microphone. Sarah's dream. This is the second chance. I'm coming to get you. Stay calm. Stay out of the water. Second chance? But that boat went down 3 years ago. Just trust me. I'm 200 yards out. Get your life jacket on. Prepare to abandon ship. I can't. Something's holding the hull. The water's inside the boat, but it's not. It's not acting like water should. It's moving up. Oh God, it's moving up the walls. Jake gripped my shoulder. I felt the cold straight through to my bones. Faster, Matt. It's starting to feed. I pushed the throttle forward. The engine roared. 150 yards. 100. I could see the other boat clearly now. A small fishing vessel, maybe 25 feet, listed badly to starboard. And the water around it, the water was climbing, defying gravity, flowing up the sides of the boat like reverse waterfalls. But it wasn't clear ocean water. It was black, thick, and in it, things moved. Shapes that might have been tentacles or might have been something worse. 50 yards, Jake shouted. Cut the engine at 30. Momentum will carry you. If you keep the engine running when you hit that water, it'll take you too. My hands shook on the wheel. 40 yards. I could see the kid now, maybe 19, 20 years old. Pressed against the wheelhouse, trying to stay away from the climbing water. 30 yards. I cut the engine. The silence was immediate and total. Even the water made no sound as it moved. We drifted forward, momentum carrying us toward the trapped boat. 20 yards, the black water noticed us. Started reaching out, probing. 10 yards. Get ready to jump, I screamed at the kid. When I say now, you jump to me. 5 yards. The water between the boats began to bubble. Not hot, cold. So cold, the air above it froze into ice crystals. Something was coming up, something vast. Now! The kid jumped, a perfect leap of desperation. He cleared the black water, cleared the gap, landed hard on the second chance's deck. Go, go, go! Jake screamed. I fired the engine, slammed it in reverse, but we were too close. The black water touched our hull, and the hunger rose. I can't describe what came out of the water. Not fully. Your mind wouldn't accept it anyway. Mine barely did. Imagine something that was part octopus, part anglerfish, part nothing that's ever lived on Earth. Bioluminescent patches that hurt to perceive. Tentacles that split into fractals. A mouth, God, a mouth that opened in dimensions that shouldn't exist. And eyes. So many eyes. All of them ancient. All of them hungry. All of them looking at me. Don't look! Jake screamed. But it was too late. I looked, and it looked back. Time stopped, or moved sideways. I was on the boat, but also in the water. Was myself, but also everyone who'd ever been taken by this thing. Fishermen from centuries past, Native Americans in canoes, Vikings who'd sailed too far, all of us, all food. The kid was screaming, the engine was screaming, Jake was screaming. But all I could hear was the hunger. It didn't speak. It just was. an endless appetite wearing the ocean like skin. Then Jake did something impossible. He grabbed the wheel, solid as any living person. The cold that came off him burned my hands, but he turned us hard to port. The boat groaned, nearly capsized, but we pulled away from that thing, inch by agonizing inch. "The ferryman!" Jake shouted. "Get to the ferryman! He's the only one who can close the crossing!" I couldn't speak, could barely think, but I pushed the throttle forward. Behind us, the hunger gave chase. Not fast, it didn't need to be. It had waited decades. It could wait a few minutes more. The water around us turned black. The fog disappeared, replaced by something worse. Clarity. We could see everything. The thing pursuing us. The terror in each other's faces. The way reality bent around that creature like light around a black hole. "There!" the kid pointed. "The pier!" Breakwater materialized out of the darkness, and there, standing at the end, the ferryman waited. He held something in his hands. A bell. Ancient. Corroded. But when he rang it, the sound cut through everything. Through the engine noise, through our screams, through the wet breathing of the thing behind us. Clear as winter stars, pure as church bells on Christmas morning. The hunger stopped. Not slowed, stopped, like it hit an invisible wall. We crashed into the pier, wood splintering. I grabbed the kid, hauled him up onto the dock. Jake followed, still solid, still burning cold. The ferryman rang the bell again. The hunger writhed, twisted, made sounds like dying whales and breaking glass. But it couldn't pass some invisible boundary. "The tide," the ferryman said calmly. "She's turned. Crossings closed." With a sound like the world's last breath, the hunger sank back into the black water. The darkness faded. Normal ocean returned. Fog rolled back in, merciful and obscuring. I collapsed on the pier, lungs burning. The kid curled up in a ball, sobbing. Jake stood between us, already starting to fade. "Is it gone?" I gasped. "For now," the ferryman said. "Till the next black tide. Always comes back, always hungry. That's the way of old things." I looked at Jake, could see through him now. "You saved us. We saved him." Jake smiled. "That's what matters. That's why I couldn't cross over proper. One last rescue, one last good thing." "Jake, time's up, little bro." He was fading faster now. "Tell Mom I love her. Tell her I'm okay. Wherever I'm going, it's better than being that thing's dinner." Wait. But he was already gone. Just empty air where my brother had been. The ferryman helped us to our feet. "Best get the boy to the hospital. He's seen too much. Needs forgetting medicine. They'll call it shock. Let them." "What about you?" He smiled that driftwood smile. "I'll be here, always am. Someone's got to mind the crossing. Keep the old things from taking more than their share." He looked out at the water. "Your brother was a good man. He'll rest easy now. Debt paid." Debt? Everyone who escapes the hunger owes a debt. Your brother paid his tonight, through you. He turned to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and boy, don't come back during a black tide. You've been marked now. It remembers everyone who gets away, and it's patient." The kid and I stumbled to my car. I drove him to the emergency room, told them we'd found him drifting, delirious. They believed it. Why wouldn't they? The truth was impossible. But I know what happened, and now you do too. So here's what I need from you. Leave a comment. Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me you believe, because it's been a week and I still can't sleep. I keep dreaming about black water and ancient hunger. Keep checking the tide charts. Keep wondering when it'll feed again. And sometimes late at night, my phone buzzes. Unknown number, always the same message. Thanks, little bro. Rest easy now, but watch the tides. Always watch the tides. I think Jake's still watching out for me, for all of us, from wherever good brothers go when their work is finally done. But the hunger is still down there, waiting, patient as the tide. So, if you live near the ocean, if you ever think about night fishing during a spring tide, remember this story. Remember the ferryman. Remember what waits in the deep channel when the water runs black. And whatever you do, don't look down when you reach the break. Some things are better left unseen, some hungers better left unfed. Sweet dreams. By the way, next month's spring tide is in 12 days. The conditions look perfect. Maybe I should go back, just to check, just to make sure the ferryman's still there, still holding the line. What do you think? Should I? Let me know in the comments below, and hit subscribe if you want to hear what happens next. Because something tells me this story isn't over, not by a long shot. The tide always turns, and the hunger is patient. Story number 2. Picture this. You're looking through old family photos when you notice something disturbing. In every picture from your grandmother's nursing home, there's one less person, and they're disappearing in a very specific order. What would you do if you realized the pattern and your loved one was next? Before I tell you what happened at Willowbrook Manor, hit that subscribe button, because after hearing this, you'll want to know if your own family is safe. Trust me on this one. The smell hit me first. Not the antiseptic hospital smell I expected, but something sweeter, like overripe fruit trying to mask decay. I stood in the lobby of Willowbrook Manor Assisted Living, clutching the bouquet of yellow roses Mom always loved, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. "You must be Sarah," the receptionist said. Her smile stretched too wide, like she'd practiced it in a mirror one too many times. "Your mother talks about you constantly. She's in room 237. I signed the visitor log, noticing how thick the book was. How many pages of names, dates, times, all in perfect alphabetical order. Anderson, Avery, Baker." The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everyone in that sick greenish glow that made healthy people look half dead. Residents shuffled past in their walkers. Some smiled, some stared at nothing. Normal nursing home stuff, right? Room 237 was at the end of the hall. Mom sat by the window, thinner than last month, staring at the parking lot like it held the secrets of the universe. "Mom." She turned slowly. For a moment, I swear she didn't recognize me. Then her face lit up. "Sarah. Oh, honey, I'm so glad you're here. I need to tell you about Agnes." I pulled up a chair, already knowing this would be one of those visits. Mom's dementia had been getting worse, mixing reality with imagination. Last time, she'd insisted the night staff were stealing her socks. The time before that, she claimed her roommate could walk through walls. "Who's Agnes, Mom?" "Agnes Albright. She lived 3 doors down. Lovely woman. Used to be a teacher in Detroit. We played cards every Tuesday." Mom's fingers twisted the edge of her blanket. "She's gone now." "I'm sorry, Mom. Did she pass away?" Mom's eyes darted to the door, then back to me. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "That's what they want us to think. But Agnes was healthy as a horse last week, then Monday morning, gone. Just like Albert." "Albert?" "Albert Ames. He was here when I moved in 6 months ago, disappeared 2 weeks after Agnes arrived. Then she lasted exactly 2 weeks. Now she's gone too." Mom grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Sarah, they're taking us alphabetically." I forced a laugh. "Mom, that's just a coincidence. People in nursing homes, they die? Is that what you were going to say?" Her voice turned sharp, lucid in a way that made my skin prickle. Agnes didn't die, Sarah. None of them died. They just disappeared. And the staff acts like they never existed at all. I spent the next hour trying to redirect the conversation. We talked about my job at the bank, about her grandchildren, about the weather. But Mom kept circling back to Agnes and Albert. By the time I left, unease had settled in my stomach like a cold stone. In the parking lot, I called my brother Tom. "How was she?" he asked, kids screaming in the background. "She has this new fixation. Thinks residents are disappearing in alphabetical order." Tom sighed. "Last month, it was poisoned pudding. The month before, mind control through the TV. It's the dementia, Sarah. You know that. I did know that." Of course I did. But as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about that visitor log. All those names in perfect order. All those pages. That night, I dreamed of empty rooms and echoing hallways. Of names being erased from existence, one letter at a time. 3 days later, I couldn't stop thinking about Mom's words. It was eating at me, the way a splinter works deeper into your skin. So I did what any rational person would do. I started researching. Willowbrook Manor's website was all stock photos and comforting phrases. Your loved one's home away from home. Pictures of smiling seniors playing bingo, enjoying meals, doing water aerobics. Nothing unusual. But when I searched for reviews, most were standard. 5 stars from guilty family members. 1 star from angry relatives complaining about cold food or rude staff. But buried on the 3rd page of Google, I found something that made my coffee go cold. A blog post from 8 months ago. What happened to my father at Willowbrook? The woman wrote about her dad, Benjamin Bowers, who'd been a resident for 3 years. Healthy, happy, then suddenly gone. The staff claimed he'd been transferred to a medical facility for treatment, but no hospital had any record of him. When she'd pressed for answers, threatened legal action, Willowbrook produced paperwork. Transfer documents, medical records, even security footage of him leaving in an ambulance. But something felt wrong to her. The signature on the transfer papers wasn't quite right. The security footage was grainy, the timestamp suspicious. She'd hired a private investigator, but the trail went cold. Benjamin Bowers had simply vanished. The blog had only 1 comment, posted 2 months later. Same thing happened to my aunt, Barbara Banks. They said she moved to live with family in Oregon. I'm her only family. My hands shook as I clicked through more searches. Found a Facebook group. Families of Willowbrook. Only 12 members, but their stories made my skin crawl. Always the same pattern. Healthy resident, sudden disappearance, official explanation that didn't quite add up. And when I listed the names, Agnes Albright, Albert Ames, Barbara Banks, Benjamin Bowers, Charles Chen, Catherine Clark, alphabetical, every single one. I called Tom immediately. "I need you to look at something." "Sarah, not this again. Just listen, please." I read him the names, the stories, the pattern. The silence on his end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, "This has to be a coincidence, or maybe you're only finding the ones that fit the pattern. Confirmation bias. Then explain why there's no record of David anyone, or Elizabeth anyone, or Frank anyone disappearing from Willowbrook. Only A's, B's, and C's. There has to be an explanation. Mom's name is Dorothy, Tom. Dorothy starts with D." More silence. Then, "I'll meet you there tomorrow, 9 a.m. The next morning, Tom and I sat in Willowbrook's administrative office. The director, Mrs. Hamilton, smiled that same too-wide smile I'd seen on the receptionist. "We're concerned about our mother," Tom said, using his lawyer voice. "She has some anxieties about other residents." "Oh, that's perfectly normal," Mrs. Hamilton assured us. "Change can be difficult for our residents. Sometimes they create stories to make sense of their new environment." She specifically mentioned Agnes Albright and Albert Ames, I said, watching her face. Not a flicker. I'm afraid I can't discuss other residents due to privacy laws, but I can assure you, Willowbrook maintains the highest standards of care. Could we see your records of resident transfers or deaths for the past year? Tom asked. Just for our peace of mind? Now her smile faltered. Just for a second. I'm afraid that information is confidential, but I can assure you. You can assure us of nothing, I interrupted. We'd like to see the visitor log. That's public, isn't it? Mrs. Hamilton's fingers drummed on her desk. Tap, tap, tap. The visitor log is for security purposes only. I'm sure you understand. We left with nothing but platitudes and promises that Mom was receiving excellent care. In the parking lot, Tom looked shaken. She's hiding something, he said. You believe me now? I believe something's wrong. But what are we supposed to do? Call the police? Tell them we think a nursing home is disappearing residents alphabetically? They'll think we're crazy. He was right. We had no proof. Just a pattern and a feeling. But as we drove away, I noticed something in my rearview mirror. A van pulling out of Willowbrook's service entrance. White, unmarked, windows tinted black. It followed us for 3 blocks before turning off. Probably nothing, I told myself. Probably. 2 weeks passed. I visited Mom every other day, watching for signs, counting residents, learning names. Dennis Davenport in room 242 loved to tell stories about his time in the Navy. Donna Dixon in 218 painted watercolors of birds. Douglas Dunn, Daniel Diaz, Deborah Dunham. So many D names. So many potential victims. Mom grew more agitated with each visit. She'd stopped going to activities, stopped eating in the dining room. I won't make it easy for them, she'd whisper. If they want Dorothy Palmer, they'll have to come get me. Then, on a Thursday morning, Dennis Davenport was gone. Transferred to hospice, the staff explained. But Dennis had been telling me about his grandson's upcoming wedding just 2 days before. Making plans, excited about life, I drove to every hospice within 50 miles. No Dennis Davenport. No record of any transfer from Willowbrook. That night, I broke into Willowbrook. Okay, broke in might be dramatic. I signed in as a visitor at 8:47 p.m., 15 minutes before visiting hours ended. Then I hid in a supply closet. Watched through the crack as the night staff made their rounds. Waited until the hallways went quiet. The administrative office was locked, but I'd learned a thing or two from YouTube. The lock was old, simple. It took me 20 minutes and a hairpin, but I got in. The files were meticulous, organized, too organized. Each resident had a folder, thick with medical records, intake forms, insurance information. I found Dennis Davenport's file. The last entry was dated yesterday. Transferred to Serenity Hospice Center. Family notified. But Dennis had no family. He told me that himself, laughing about being a stubborn old bachelor. I photographed everything, then moved to the next cabinet. Found Agnes Albright, Albert Ames, all of them. Every file ended the same way. Transfer, family notified. Case closed. Then I found something that made my blood freeze. A separate filing system. Color-coded folders. Red for A's, orange for B's, yellow for C's, green for D's. Inside each folder lists, names, room numbers, dates, and next to each date a single word. Completed. Dorothy Palmer's name was on the green list. The date next to it, tomorrow. I grabbed the folders, shoving them into my bag. Evidence, finally, real evidence. I turned to leave and found Mrs. Hamilton standing in the doorway. "Sarah," she said, voice calm as still water. "You really shouldn't be here." I ran, pushed past her down the hall past the startled night nurse. Behind me, footsteps, multiple sets. They were coming. I burst through the emergency exit, alarms screaming. Made it to my car, hands shaking so bad I dropped the keys twice. In the mirror, I saw them. 3 men in white uniforms standing at the door, watching. Not chasing, just watching. I drove home like a madwoman, called Tom, called the police, uploaded the photos to cloud storage, emailed them to myself, to Tom, to 3 different news stations. "We need to get Mom out," I told Tom. "Tonight, now." The police said they'd send someone in the morning. There won't be a morning, not for Mom. But Tom was 40 minutes away, and when I got back to Willowbrook, the night staff wouldn't let me in. "Visiting hours are over," they said. Professional, polite, immovable. I spent the night in my car in the parking lot, watching, waiting. Saw that same white van pull up around 3 a.m. Saw them wheel out a gurney covered in a white sheet. The form underneath, small, frail, mom-sized. The police found nothing. Oh, they investigated, took my photos seriously enough to get a warrant. But by the time they arrived at Willowbrook the next morning, it was like walking into a different universe. The color-coded files I'd photographed? Gone. Vanished like they'd never existed. The filing cabinet that had held them now contained nothing but standard medical supplies inventory. Boxes of gloves, gauze, normal things. "Ma'am," Detective Morrison said, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for people he thought were having a breakdown. "We've gone through everything. Your mother's transfer papers are all in order. Look, here's the signature from the receiving facility." I stared at the paper he handed me. Serenity Gardens Medical Center. A place I'd never heard of. The signature at the bottom, supposed to be Mom's, was close. Too close. Someone had practiced her handwriting. Studied it, but they'd gotten the way she curved her Y wrong. Mom had taught 3rd grade for 30 years. She had very specific ideas about proper letter formation. "This isn't her signature," I insisted. "Look at the I, she never—" "Signatures can change," the detective interrupted, "especially with elderly patients. Arthritis, tremors, confusion. I've seen it happen with my own mother." Mrs. Hamilton appeared then, dressed in a crisp blue suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She expressed deep concern about my break-in, but graciously decided not to press charges, understanding the stress of having a loved one in memory care. "We know this is difficult," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "Perhaps you'd like to speak with our counselor. Grief can manifest in many ways, including paranoid ideation." Paranoid ideation. She was already building a narrative. Unstable daughter, overwhelming grief, breaking and entering. Who would believe me now? I hired a private investigator with my savings. Marcus Freeman came recommended, ex-FBI, the kind who didn't mind bending rules. He listened to my story without interrupting, examined the evidence, then named a price that made my stomach drop. "I can give you half now," I said. "The rest when you find something." Marcus studied me for a long moment. "Your mother?" I nodded. "I'll take the case. Pay me when you can." 2 weeks later, Marcus called. "We need to meet. Not your place. Not mine. You know Forest Park? The picnic area by the lake." An hour later, I sat across from him at a weathered wooden table. He looked tired, worn, like whatever he'd found had aged him years and days. "Your mother is alive," he said without preamble. "At least she was 3 days ago." The world tilted. I gripped the table. "How? Where?" "A medical research facility 3 states away. Sky Industries. On paper they develop treatments for age-related diseases, but their funding doesn't match their output. Millions in grants, minimal published research." Marcus laid out surveillance photos. I tracked the white vans. They go to Sky. Every transfer from Willowbrook ends up there. But here's where it gets strange. He pulled out more photos. These are Sky's researchers. Run them through facial recognition. Half of them used to be residents at various nursing homes, including Willowbrook. I stared at the images. Elderly people in lab coats, walking purposefully, working at computers. One of them, oh my God, that's Agnes Albright, Mom's friend. She's supposed to be dead. Not dead, changed. Look closer. I did. Agnes looked different. Younger wasn't the right word. Sharper, more focused, like someone had turned up the contrast on her entire being. What are they doing to them? Marcus pulled out internal documents. Near as I can tell, Sky Industries isn't developing treatments for age-related cognitive decline. They're studying it, using it. They believe that dementia, Alzheimer's, these conditions don't destroy the mind. They reveal something underneath, something that normal cognitive function suppresses. That's insane. Is it? Think about it. Savant syndrome. People who suffer brain injuries and suddenly can play piano or speak languages they never learned. What if dementia works similarly? What if it doesn't take away but transforms? That night, the phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Palmer? A woman's voice, professional, calm. This is Dr. Elizabeth Kane from Sky Industries. I believe we should talk. My blood went cold. How did you get this number? The same way you got our name. Research, investigation. Following patterns. We're not so different, you and I. Both looking for answers. Both trying to help the people we care about. You kidnapped my mother. We offered her an opportunity, one that her advancing condition made her uniquely qualified for. But I understand your concern, that's why I'm calling. To invite you to visit. See for yourself what we do here. Speak with Dorothy, if she wishes to speak with you. If? Miss Palmer, what do you know about the ship of Theseus? The philosophical question caught me off guard. If you replace every part of a ship, is it still the same ship? Exactly. Your mother is here, but the woman you knew, the teacher who raised you, graded papers at the kitchen table, made cookies for bake sales, that woman was already fading. Dementia was taking her piece by piece. We simply guided the reconstruction. Into what? Into something extraordinary. Come see for yourself. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., I'll have a pass waiting at the gate. Building C rose before me like a glass and steel mountain. Modern, clean. Nothing like the Gothic horror I'd imagined. The blue line on the floor led through automatic doors into a lobby that belonged in a tech startup. Plants, natural light, even a coffee bar. Miss Palmer. Dr. Elizabeth Kane stood by the elevators. Younger than her voice suggested. Maybe 40. Sharp eyes behind designer glasses. Thank you for coming. She didn't offer her hand, didn't smile, just gestured for me to follow. The elevator rose silently. 3rd floor, 4th, 5th. Each floor we passed showed glimpses of laboratories, clean rooms, people in white coats bent over computers or complex equipment. Normal, mundane, nothing sinister. You're wondering where the horror is, Dr. Kane said. The cages, the screaming victims. Sorry to disappoint. Where's my mother? Patience, first, context. Do you know what sundowning is? I nodded. When dementia patients get agitated in the evening. Exactly. But do you know why it happens? As daylight fades, the brain struggles to maintain its constructed reality. The walls between conscious and unconscious thought become thin. Dementia patients don't get confused. They see too clearly. See multiple realities simultaneously. Past, present, possible futures. Medicine calls it confusion. We call it expanded perception. The elevator stopped at the 8th floor. The doors opened to reveal a different world. Warm colors, soft lighting, music drifting from somewhere. It looked like an upscale apartment building. Welcome to the transition wing, Dr. Kane said. This is where our participants live during the process. Would you like to see Agnes Albright first? I believe she and your mother were friends. My heart hammered. She's here? Room 803, fair warning, she may not be what you expect. We walked down a hallway that smelled like vanilla and old books. Nothing medical about it. Dr. Kane knocked on a door marked with a small brass nameplate. A. Albright. Come in. The voice was Agnes's, but different. Clearer. We entered a studio apartment. Bookshelves lined the walls. A desk covered in papers sat by the window. And there, in a reading chair, sat Agnes Albright. Alive, alert, but changed. "Sarah Palmer," she said before I could speak, "Dorothy's daughter. You have her eyes. Also her stubbornness, judging by your presence here." "Agnes, what did they do to you?" She laughed. A young sound from an old throat. "Do?" They offered me a choice. Continue dissolving into nothing, memories scattered like leaves, or become something new. I chose transformation. Through what? Drugs? Surgery? Through understanding. Agnes stood, moved to her desk with surprising grace. "Look at this, my work." The papers were covered in equations, complex mathematical formulas that hurt to look at, diagrams that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. "I was a third-grade teacher," Agnes continued. "Basic arithmetic was my limit. Now, I'm working on a unified theory of consciousness. The dementia didn't take my mind. It revealed capabilities I never knew existed, layers of thought, dimensions of reasoning, all locked away by the limitations of normal cognition." "That's not possible." "Isn't it?" Dr. Kane interjected. "The human brain uses only a fraction of its potential. Various conditions can unlock hidden capabilities. Acquired savant syndrome, hyperthymesia. We simply found a way to guide the unlocking." "By kidnapping nursing home residents? By offering them an alternative to oblivion," Agnes said sharply. "Do you know what dementia feels like from the inside? It's not peaceful confusion. It's terror. Watching yourself disappear piece by piece, knowing what's coming but powerless to stop it. They offered us a different path." "Where is she? Where's my mother?" Agnes and Dr. Kane exchanged glances. "She's in the garden," Agnes said softly. "But Sarah, she's deep in transition. She may not acknowledge you." The garden was on the roof, enclosed in glass. Tropical plants created a green maze. Fountains bubbled. Birds sang. And there, sitting on a bench, writing in a notebook, was Mom. But not Mom. The woman wore my mother's face, had her gray hair, though longer now, her hands, her wedding ring. But everything else was wrong. The way she sat, the intensity of her focus, the slight smile that played on her lips as she wrote. "Mom?" She looked up, through me, past me. Her eyes were bright, clear. But they didn't see her daughter, they saw something else. "The patterns are clearer today," she said to no one. "The mathematical foundations of memory, how they spiral, Fibonacci sequences in the folds of thought. I should document this." She returned to her notebook, writing in symbols I didn't recognize. "It's stage 3, Dr. Kane explained quietly. Deep reconstruction. She's rebuilding her cognitive framework from the ground up. In a few weeks, she'll stabilize, integrate her old self with her new capabilities. And if I took her home now, the process would collapse. Without the supporting medications, the guided therapy, she'd experience catastrophic cognitive failure. Not dementia, complete neural breakdown." I watched my mother write her impossible equations, saw the peace on her face, the purpose. She looked happier than she had in years. Can I stay with her, just for a while?" Dr. Kane checked her watch. "1 hour, then you need to decide." "Decide what?" "Whether to leave her here to complete her transformation, or exercise your legal authority as her medical proxy to end the treatment. Force us to return her to a traditional care facility, where she'll fade away like she was always going to." She left me alone with the stranger who wore my mother's face, I sat beside her on the bench. She didn't acknowledge me, just kept writing, occasionally humming, a song I recognized from my childhood. The same tune she'd hummed while cooking dinner, doing laundry, living her small, beautiful life. "I'm scared, Mom," I whispered. "I don't know what's right. Don't know if this is saving you or stealing you. Don't know if I'm supposed to fight for who you were or accept who you're becoming." She paused in her writing, turned to look at me. For just a moment, I saw recognition flicker. "Sarah?" Her voice was distant, confused. "Is it Sunday already? Did you bring the children?" "No, Mom, it's just me." "Oh." She blinked. The moment passed. Her eyes went distant again. "The patterns are beautiful today. Would you like to see?" She showed me her notebook. The symbols meant nothing to me, but she explained them with such joy, such wonder, like a child discovering the ocean for the first time. When Dr. Kane returned, I knew my answer. "How long until she stabilizes?" 6 to 8 weeks. You can visit, watch the process, make sure we're treating her well. And then? Then she'll be one of us, a researcher, a pioneer, exploring dimensions of thought we can barely imagine. She'll remember you, love you, but she won't be the woman who taught 3rd grade and baked cookies for PTA meetings. Epilogue. 3 months later. I visit every week now. Watch my mother become something new. She knows me most days, calls me by name, asks about my life. But she also talks about dimensions I can't see, mathematics I can't understand, beauty I can't perceive. Tom thinks I've been brainwashed. Maybe I have. But I've also seen Agnes's research bear fruit, treatments for cognitive decline that actually work, understanding of consciousness that pushes the boundaries of neuroscience, all developed by minds that medicine said were dying. Willowbrook still operates, still takes residents alphabetically. But now I know why. They're not stealing our elderly, they're recruiting them, offering them a chance to become something more than human. They approached me last week. Dr. Kane, Mrs. Hamilton, even Agnes, made their pitch in a conference room at Sky. "You have the markers," Mrs. Hamilton explained, showing me brain scans taken during my visits. "Genetic predisposition to cognitive flexibility. The same patterns we see in our most successful transitions." They gave me time to think. No pressure, no coercion, just an open door to a different future. Mom asked me yesterday, during one of her clear moments, if I was happy, really happy, living my small life, working at the bank, coming home to an empty apartment. "There's so much more," she said, "so much beauty you can't see, connections you can't make, thoughts you can't think." "Not yet. Not yet." The words echo, tempt, promise. So I'm putting this story out there, not as a warning anymore, but as a question. If you could transcend your own limitations, would you? If you could see beyond the veil of normal consciousness, would you look? If you could become something more than human, would you change? The choice is coming, for all of us, sooner than we think. Willowbrook is still taking residence, alphabetically, carefully, with purpose. And somewhere, in a garden of impossible thoughts, my mother is writing equations that will change the world. She's happy. Isn't that what matters? The patterns are there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for eyes that can see them. And once you start looking, you can't stop. You won't want to. Trust me, I know. If this story made you think, hit subscribe to explore more questions about consciousness, identity, and what it means to be human. Share it with someone who isn't afraid to question reality. And comment below, would you make the choice? Would you transform? Because the patterns are everywhere. Once you know how to look, Story number 3. I still remember the taste of that last Snickers bar. Chocolate, peanuts, caramel, and something else. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that made my tongue go numb and my vision blur at the edges. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the vending machine first. The one that changed everything. The one that's probably still out there waiting for its next victim. Actually, before I continue, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you really looked at a vending machine? I mean, really looked at it? Not just glanced at the snacks behind the glass, but examined the machine itself. The way the fluorescent lights flicker just slightly. The hum that's almost too low to hear. The reflection in the glass that sometimes shows things that aren't quite there. No? Well, consider yourself lucky. The story begins now. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Seattle does that sometimes. Wraps itself in gray cotton and refuses to let go. I was working late at the Amazon Fulfillment Center, 3rd shift, the kind of job that makes you question every life choice you've ever made. My name's Marcus, by the way. Marcus Chen. 28 years old, student loans up to my eyeballs, and a master's degree in psychology that was about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. It was Tuesday, October 17th, around 2:47 a.m. I know because I checked my phone right before everything went sideways. The break room vending machine had been broken for weeks. Management kept promising to fix it, but promises don't fill empty stomachs during a 10-hour shift. So, when I walked past the loading dock and saw it, a vending machine I'd never noticed before, standing there like it had always belonged, I didn't question it. I should have questioned it. The machine was old. Not vintage cool old, but wrong old. Like it had been sitting in someone's grandmother's basement since the 70s, and had absorbed all the mold and shadows and forgotten dreams. The paint was that particular shade of brown that only existed in the Carter administration. The glass front was slightly warped, making the contents look like they were underwater. But I could see snacks. Real snacks. Snickers, Doritos, those little powdered donuts that taste like childhood and regret. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since... when? Yesterday morning? Time gets weird on night shift. I pulled out my wallet. $3.47 in crumpled bills and sticky quarters. The price display on the machine was broken. Just showed 88 in faded red numbers. But there was a handwritten sign taped below it. Pay what you fear it's worth. Weird marketing gimmick, I thought. Probably some startup's attempt at viral advertising. Seattle was full of that tech bro nonsense. I fed $1 into the slot. The machine didn't just accept it, it seemed to inhale it. The bill disappeared with a sound like someone gasping for air. The buttons beside each snack weren't labeled with letters and numbers like normal. Instead, each one had a tiny symbol, a spider, a closed door, an empty chair, a clock showing midnight. I pressed B4, the Snickers bar. The machine made a sound I'll never forget. Not the normal mechanical whir and thunk. This was organic, like joints popping, like someone cracking their knuckles underwater. The Snickers bar didn't fall, it was pushed out. By what I couldn't see, but for just a second I swear I saw fingers behind it. Too many fingers. I grabbed the candy bar and practically ran back to my station. Told myself I was being stupid, overtired. Too much caffeine, not enough food. The wrapper felt normal enough. Crinkly, familiar. I tore it open and took a bite. Chocolate, peanuts, caramel, and then I saw it. My worst fear. Not in the candy bar, but suddenly, everywhere around me. The thing I'd been running from since I was 7 years old. The thing that happened in my uncle's pool that summer. The reason I couldn't... No, I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me back up. Let me tell you what really happened. What's still happening. The chocolate melted on my tongue, but it tasted wrong. Like pennies. Like blood. And then the warehouse lights started doing something impossible. They were creating shadows that moved independently of their sources. shadows that had weight, shadows that whispered. Marcus? I dropped the candy bar, looked around. The warehouse was empty. It had always been empty at this hour, just me and 5 million packages waiting to make someone's day better or worse. Marcus, we've been waiting. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. From inside my skull, from under my tongue, from the spaces between my teeth. I ran. Left my station, left my badge, left my dignity scattered on the concrete floor. Burst through the emergency exit and set off every alarm in the building. Didn't care. The rain hit my face like cold needles, but it was real, it was clean. It was not the thing in the shadows. I made it to my car, a beat-up 2015 Honda Civic with a broken taillight and dreams of being a real vehicle someday. Started the engine with shaking hands. In the rearview mirror I saw the warehouse. All the lights were off. That was impossible. The warehouse never went dark, never. And standing by the loading dock right where I'd found it was the vending machine, still glowing, still humming, still waiting. I drove home doing 90 in a 45 zone, ran 3 red lights, didn't care. The thing about fear, real fear, is that it makes all the normal rules seem pointless. What's a traffic ticket compared to the shadows that shouldn't exist? My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building in Capitol Hill that had seen better decades. I took the stairs 3 at a time, fumbled with my keys, slammed the door behind me, turned on every light. The shadows retreated to their proper corners, behaving like shadows should. I was safe. I was home. I was losing my mind. The Snickers wrapper was still in my pocket. I pulled it out with the careful movements of someone handling a live grenade. It looked normal now. Completely normal. Except the ingredients list was wrong. Where it should have said milk chocolate and peanuts, it said other things. Impossible things. Things like childhood terror and suppressed memories, and the sound of water filling your lungs. I threw it in the trash, then thought better of it and fished it out. Evidence. I needed evidence that I wasn't going crazy, that this had really happened. My phone buzzed, a text from my supervisor. "Where are you? Your station's been empty for an hour." An hour? I'd been gone maybe 10 minutes, 15 at most. I looked at the clock on my phone, 4:23 a.m. I couldn't be right. It had been 2:47 when I'd found the machine. I'd eaten the candy bar, seen the shadows, run to my car. 20 minutes, tops. Another text. "Security footage shows you never came in tonight. Are you okay?" My blood turned to ice water. I'd been there. I'd badged in at 6 p.m. like always. I'd sorted packages, taken my first break, found the vending machine. The vending machine. I called in sick. Some lie about food poisoning. Then I did something stupid. Something you should never do when reality starts showing cracks. I went online, started searching. Vending machine plus Seattle plus strange. Vending machine plus worst fear. Vending machine plus impossible. Nothing. Nothing, nothing. Then, buried on page 17 of the results, a forum post from 2019. "Anyone else see the brown vending machine? Showed up at my work last week. Ate a Twix and now I can't stop seeing my dad. He's been dead for 10 years. No replies. User deleted. Another post from 2021. "Don't use the vending machine. Don't use the vending machine. It knows things. It shows things. It takes things. I lost 3 days. When I came back, my daughter didn't recognize me. Also, no replies. Also, deleted. I kept searching. Found breadcrumbs, fragments. A Reddit thread that had been removed but still showed in Google's cache. A YouTube video titled, "The Vending Machine Took My Memories," with 0 views. Uploaded 3 years ago. The video was just static, but the static had shapes in it. Shapes that looked like... I slammed my laptop shut, took a shower. Tried to wash off the feeling of wrongness that clung to my skin like spider silk. The water was too hot, then too cold, then somehow both at once. I got out, toweled off, looked in the mirror. My reflection was half a second off, like a badly dubbed movie. I moved my hand. My reflection moved its hand. But not quite at the same time, not quite the same way. That's when I understood. The vending machine didn't just show you your worst fear, it fed it to you, made you digest it, made it part of you. And once it was inside, it grew. I called in sick for the rest of the week, spent my days researching, my nights trying not to sleep. Because when I slept, I dreamed of the machine. And in my dreams, it wasn't standing by the loading dock. It was in my living room, in my bedroom, in my bathroom, humming its broken tune while I brushed my teeth. By Friday, I'd found the pattern. The brown vending machine appeared at random locations throughout Seattle. Always at night. Always in places where people worked alone. Warehouses, hospitals, office buildings. It would stay for exactly 7 days, then vanish. No security footage ever caught it arriving or leaving. It was just there, until it wasn't. But that wasn't the pattern that scared me. What scared me was what happened to the people who used it. David Kim, night janitor at a Microsoft building in Redmond, used the machine on a Monday. By Friday, his coworkers found him in a supply closet, pressing himself into the corner, claiming the walls were getting smaller. He'd been there for 3 days. The closet was 10 by 12 feet. He insisted it was the size of a coffin. Sarah Martinez, security guard at a Swedish medical center, bought a bag of chips from the machine. Started seeing her daughter everywhere. Her daughter who died in a car accident 6 months earlier. Sarah followed one of these visions into traffic. She survived, but something in her eyes had broken. She kept asking the nurses why her daughter wouldn't stop screaming. Tommy Washington, overnight stalker at a QFC in Ballard, grabbed a Coke from the machine. The next morning, every mirror in his apartment was shattered. He'd done it himself, he said, because his reflection was drowning. Had been drowning all night. He could see the water rising in the glass, could see himself pounding on the other side, mouth open in a silent scream. Each story was different, but the core was the same. The machine knew. It knew what lived in the dark corners of your mind, the fears you'd buried so deep you'd forgotten they existed. And it brought them up, brought them out, brought them home. I mapped the locations, put pins in a digital map, looked for a pattern, a progression, some kind of logic. And then I saw it. The machine was moving in a spiral, a tightening spiral. And at the center was Pike Place Market, the heart of Seattle. The place where thousands of people gathered every day, tourists, locals, children. I had to warn someone, but who? The police? Hello, 911, there's a haunted vending machine on the loose? They'd Baker Act me before I finished the sentence. The media, they'd want proof, evidence. Video of the machine doing its impossible thing. Video. That gave me an idea, a terrible idea. The kind of idea that gets people killed in horror movies. But I was already in a horror movie, wasn't I? Might as well play my part. I went to Best Buy, bought 3 GoPros, a dozen memory cards, and enough batteries to power a small country. The teenager at the checkout counter gave me a look that said he'd seen weirder, but not by much. Making a documentary? He asked. Something like that, I said. I spent Saturday setting up. If the pattern held, the machine would appear somewhere in the International District tonight. 3 warehouses, 2 parking garages, and a 24-hour laundromat. I placed cameras at all of them, motion activated, night vision enabled. If that thing showed up, I'd catch it. Then I waited. 10 p.m. Nothing. Midnight. Nothing. 2 a.m. Nothing. 3 a.m. My phone buzzed. The camera at the laundromat had triggered. I pulled up the feed with trembling fingers. There it was. The brown vending machine, standing between 2 washing machines like it had always been there, like it belonged. The footage was clear, Crystal clear, too clear. I could read the handwritten sign, could see the symbols on the buttons, could see someone approaching it. "No," I whispered. "Don't, please don't." It was a kid, maybe 19, 20, wearing a UW hoodie and ripped jeans, laundry basket under one arm. He stopped in front of the machine, tilted his head, reached into his pocket. I was already moving, grabbed my keys, ran for the door. The laundromat was 12 minutes away. 10 if I hit the lights right. 8 if I broke every traffic law in the book. I made it in 6. Burst through the door like a madman. The kid was still there, still standing in front of the machine. A Snickers bar in his hand, unopened. "Don't eat that," I shouted. He spun around, startled, nearly dropped the candy bar. "Dude, what the hell?" The candy bar, put it down, walk away, trust me. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head, which, given what I'd been through, wouldn't have surprised me. "It's just a Snickers, man. Chill." "It's not. Look at it. Really look at it." He glanced down at the wrapper. His face changed. Went from annoyed to confused to afraid. "What? The ingredients?" "Yeah, now put it down and back away." He dropped it like it was made of spiders. Backed away slowly. The vending machine hummed louder, angry, cheated. "What is that thing?" the kid asked. "I don't know, but it's dangerous. We need to—" The lights went out. All of them. The laundromat plunged into perfect darkness. Not normal darkness, not city darkness with its ambient glow and exit signs. This was darkness with weight. Darkness with teeth. "Oh God," the kid whispered. "Oh God, I can hear it." So could I, the sound of rushing water, getting closer, rising. My worst fear. The thing that had been chasing me since I was 7. Since that day at my uncle's pool when I'd gone under and stayed under for 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Since I'd seen what waited at the bottom of deep water. What watched with eyes that weren't eyes. "Run," I said. We ran, slammed into washing machines, tripped over abandoned laundry baskets, clawed our way toward where we thought the door should be. Behind us, the water rose. Impossible water in an impossible darkness. I could feel it lapping at my ankles. Cold, wrong, full of things that moved. The door wasn't where it should have been, because of course it wasn't. In the machine's darkness, geography meant nothing. We could have been running for miles or inches. Time stretched like taffy. The kid was sobbing. Or maybe that was me. Then, light, sudden, blinding. The laundromat snapped back into focus like a rubber band released. We were standing by the door, hands on the handle. The vending machine sat quietly between the washers. Innocent, patient. The kid's Snickers bar was back in the dispensing slot. Waiting. We ran, again. This time, we made it outside, stood on the sidewalk, gasping, shaking, alive. The kid looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "What was that?" he asked. "Your worst fear," I said. "Or maybe mine, I don't know anymore." "The water." "You felt it too?" He nodded. "But that's not my fear. I'm not afraid of water. I'm afraid of—" He stopped, went pale. Oh God, the candy bar. It wasn't for me, was it? It was using me to get to you. I felt my blood turn to ice. Again. Getting to be a habit. What do you mean? I mean, I don't even like Snickers. I'm allergic to peanuts. But I had to have it, had to. Like something was pulling me. The machine wasn't just patient, it was smart, it was hunting. And it had figured out how to use people as bait. "We need to stop it," I said. The kid laughed, not a happy sound. "How do you stop something like that?" Good question. Great question. The kind of question that keeps you up at night and makes you check your mirrors for movements that shouldn't be there. But I had an idea. Another terrible idea, because apparently that's all I had left. "We don't stop it," I said. "We feed it." The kid's name was Jason Ying, computer science major at UW. Smart enough to understand that what we'd experienced broke several laws of physics. scared enough not to care about the impossibility of it all. We sat in a Denny's on Aurora Avenue, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt hope and trying to make sense of the senseless. The waitress kept refilling our cups without being asked. Maybe she could see the shell-shocked look in our eyes. Maybe she'd seen it before. This was Seattle, after all. Weird was part of the local flavor. "Okay," Jason said, pulling out his laptop. "Let's think about this logically. It's a machine. Machines have patterns, rules, limitations. It's not just a machine," I said. "It's more. Everything is just a machine when you break it down far enough, even fear, especially fear." He started typing. Fast. Code appeared on his screen like digital poetry. Fear is just pattern recognition gone wrong. Your brain sees a shadow, matches it to predator, floods your system with chemicals. Fight or flight. Basic programming. This thing knows my worst fear. My specific, personal, because it's reading you. Somehow. Biometrics maybe. Micro-expressions. Hell, maybe it's scanning your brainwaves. The technology exists. DARPA's been working on... DARPA doesn't make vending machines that break reality. He stopped typing. Looked at me. "You sure about that?" I wasn't sure about anything anymore. "Look," he continued, "you said it moves in a pattern. Spiral, heading for Pike Place. Why? Maximum victims, I guessed. Biggest crowd? Or biggest feast?" He turned his laptop toward me. "I've been tracking social media, keywords, variations of vending machine and fear and Seattle. Look at the timestamp spread." Data flowed across the screen. Tweets, Instagram posts, TikToks, all mentioning encounters with the machine, all deleted within hours of posting. But Jason had caught them, cached them. The timeline was damning. "It's accelerating," I said. "Feeding more frequently, and look at this." He pulled up a map. Not just of Seattle, of the whole Pacific Northwest, pins everywhere, Portland, Spokane, Vancouver. It's not just one machine. My stomach dropped. How many? Based on the data, at least 12, maybe more, all moving in patterns, all converging. On Seattle. On Pike Place, tomorrow night, October 31st. Halloween, of course. The night when the wall between normal and nightmare was thinnest. When people expected fear, courted it, wrapped it in fun-sized candy bars and called it entertainment. "We have to warn people," I said. "Warn them about what? Magic vending machines. They'll think it's a publicity stunt. Viral marketing for some horror movie." He was right. In the age of social media, the extraordinary became ordinary. The impossible became content. People would line up to use a haunted vending machine, post selfies with it, live stream their worst fears for likes and subscribes. "Then we stop them ourselves," I said. "How?" That was the question, wasn't it? How do you stop something that exists outside the normal rules? That feeds on fear like a vampire feeds on blood? "You said everything is a machine," I said slowly. "Machines can be hacked." Jason's eyes lit up. "You want to hack fear itself?" "I want to hack the machine, make it malfunction, feed it something that breaks its programming." "Like what?" I thought about my encounter. The water rising. The darkness with weight. The fear that had chased me for 21 years. What if we fed it a fear that doesn't exist? Explain. The machine reads us, knows our fears. But what if we gave it something to read that wasn't real? A manufactured fear, something so specific, so impossible, that trying to manifest it would cause a paradox. Jason was typing again. Faster now, excited. Like a logic bomb, a fear of something that can't exist. The machine tries to create it, can't, crashes. Exactly. But how do we manufacture a fear? Fear is involuntary. You can't just decide to be afraid of something. He was right, but what if we don't have to? What if we just have to make the machine think we're afraid? More typing. His screen filled with biomedical data. Heart rate patterns. Galvanic skin response. Pupil dilation. All the physical markers of fear. We could simulate it, create a device that mimics the biometric signature of fear. But we'd need to know exactly how the machine reads us. I know someone who might help, I said, remembering the forum posts, the deleted videos, the breadcrumb trail of victims. But first, we need to find someone who's used the machine and survived. Really survived, not just physically. Any ideas? I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my screenshots of deleted posts, found the one I was looking for. Tommy Washington, the mirror guy. He posted again, 3 weeks after his encounter. The post was short. It's still with me, but I'm learning to live with it. If you've seen the machine, if you've used it, you're not alone. Meet me at the Space Needle, Tuesdays, midnight. Look for the man who carries his own reflection. That's tonight, Jason said. Then we better hurry. We paid for our coffee with crumpled bills that smelled like fear sweat. Drove through Seattle streets that seemed darker than usual. Every shadow could hide a vending machine. Every reflection could be watching. The Space Needle at midnight was supposed to be closed, but Tommy was there, standing in the observation deck's shadow. He looked wrong, like someone had traced a person from memory and gotten the proportions slightly off. His shadow fell in 2 directions. You used the machine, he said, not a question. Yeah, I said. The water? Still rising? He smiled sadly. It never stops, but you learn to swim even when you're drowning. He looked at Jason. You? Almost. This guy saved me. Lucky. Most don't get saved, most don't want to be. Tommy pulled out a flask, took a sip, offered it to us. Helps with the reflections. Makes them blurry. Easier to ignore what's wrong with them. I took a sip. Whiskey. But it tasted like chlorine, like pool water. I passed it to Jason, who politely declined. We want to stop the machines, I said. Tommy laughed, actually laughed. Stop them? You can't stop them. They're not really here, not really anywhere. They're just doors, windows, places where the fear leaks through. From where? From wherever fears live when we're not feeling them. The place that sends the nightmares. The place that knows exactly what will break you. Another sip. But you can't break what's already broken. What do you mean? He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. One pupil was larger than the other. I mean, the machines aren't the problem. We are. They only work because we're afraid. Because we carry our fears like luggage, dragging them everywhere. The machines just open the bags. So, if we weren't afraid, then they'd be just vending machines. Broken ones. Selling expired candy to no one. He stood, swayed slightly. His shadow steadied him. But good luck not being afraid. Fear's what keeps us alive. What makes us human. Take that away, and what's left? Someone who can stop the machines, Jason said quietly. Tommy looked at him. Through him. Past him to something only he could see. Maybe. Or someone who becomes one. He started walking away, then stopped. If you're really going to try, there's something you should know. The machines don't just feed on fear, they store it. Every person who's used one, their fear is still in there, growing, multiplying. And tomorrow night... What? I asked. What happens tomorrow night? Harvest season, he said. And then he was gone. Walking into shadows that swallowed him like water. Jason and I stood there, processing. The Space Needle loomed above us, a giant needle ready to puncture the sky, or maybe to inject something. Something that had been building up, fermenting, waiting for the right moment to flood the system. We need that device, Jason said. The fear simulator, and we need it fast. I know someone, I said, thinking of my useless psychology degree. My professors who'd studied fear like some people studied wine. But she's not going to like this. Does anyone like any of this? Fair point. We had less than 24 hours. One day to create a fake fear, hack a supernatural vending machine, and save Seattle from its own nightmares. No pressure, no problem. No way this could go horribly wrong. But as we walked back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that Tommy was right. The machines weren't the real problem. We were, our fears, our inability to let go of what scared us. We carried our demons like comfort objects, feeding them with our attention, growing them with our avoidance. The vending machines just gave them bodies. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, had been my abnormal psychology professor at UW. She'd spent 30 years studying fear, mapping it, categorizing it. She'd written papers with titles like The Taxonomy of Terror and Evolutionary Advantages of Anxiety Disorders. If anyone could help us manufacture a fear, it was her. She lived in a Victorian house in Wallingford that looked like it had escaped from a Gothic novel. All turrets and gingerbread trim and windows that watched you approach. I'd been there once before, for an end-of-semester party where we'd discussed phobias over wine and cheese. This visit was less festive. Marcus. She answered the door in a silk robe and an expression of profound annoyance. It's 3 a.m. I know, I'm sorry, but this is important. Unless someone is dying, someone might be. Lots of someones. Tomorrow night. She studied my face. Saw something there that made her step aside. Come in, both of you. Jason and I entered, grateful. Her house smelled like old books and bergamot tea. Comfortable, safe, normal. Everything the world outside wasn't anymore. We told her everything. The vending machines, the fears made manifest, the pattern, the convergence. She listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through ski, skepticism, interest, and finally, a kind of grim acceptance. Show me the footage, she said. I pulled up the GoPro recording on my phone, the vending machine materializing, the kid approaching, the darkness that followed. She watched it 3 times, zooming in on details, pausing at specific moments. Fascinating, she finally said. Absolutely fascinating. That's one word for it, Jason muttered. You don't understand. She stood, began pacing. I've theorized about something like this for years, a physical manifestation of the fear response, a way to externalize and examine our deepest anxieties. But I never imagined that someone would weaponize it, I suggested, that it would weaponize itself. She moved to a bookshelf, pulled down a leather journal. Fear isn't just an emotion. It's an energy, a force. Every time we feel afraid, we generate something. Call it psychic residue, emotional radiation. It has to go somewhere. And the machines collect it, Jason said. More than collect, they cultivate it, refine it, like a distillery for terror. She flipped through pages covered in equations and diagrams. If your pattern is correct, if they're all converging tomorrow night, harvest season, I quoted Tommy. But harvest for what? She looked at us with eyes that had seen too many theories become reality. For birth. Something is using our fears to gestate, to grow, and when it's collected enough, when it's fed enough. It emerges, Jason finished. We sat with that for a moment. The idea that our fears, our personal terrors, were being used as building blocks for something larger. Something that would step into our world wearing a skin made of nightmares. So, how do we stop it? I asked. Your idea about a false fear is sound in theory, Dr. Chen said. But it would need to be precise, specific, something that registers as fear to the machine but creates a paradox when manifested. Like what? She smiled. It wasn't a comforting expression. Like the fear of not being afraid. Jason's fingers flew over his laptop keyboard. That's brilliant. A recursive loop. The machine tries to create something that makes you afraid of not being afraid. But the moment you feel that fear, you're no longer not afraid, so the fear disappears. But then you're not afraid again, so the fear returns. Exactly. An infinite feedback loop. It would be like dividing by 0. The system would crash. But how do we make ourselves feel that? I asked. How do you fear the absence of fear? Dr. Chen moved to another bookshelf, pulled out a small device that looked like a fitness tracker had mated with a lie detector. Biofeedback manipulation. I developed this for treating phobia patients. It can induce the physical symptoms of any emotional state, including fear. You can fake fear? Jason asked, impressed. I can fake the body's fear response. Elevated heart rate, increased cortisol, pupil dilation. Whether that's enough to fool your machines? Only one way to find out, I said. We spent the next 6 hours preparing. Jason coded. Dr. Chen calibrated. I tried not to think about what we were about to do. The sun rose like a bloodshot eye, bringing October 31st with it. Halloween, the day when monsters were supposed to be fake. By noon, we were ready. The device looked innocuous. A simple wristband with a small display. But when activated, it would flood my system with the biological markers of terror. False terror, impossible terror, the fear of not being afraid. Remember, Dr. Chen said, the moment you put this on and activate it near the machine, you'll feel everything. Your body won't know the fear is fake. You'll experience genuine terror. Of what? I asked. Of whatever your mind fills in the blanks with. The fear needs a shape, even if that shape is nothing. That doesn't make sense. Neither do vending machines that serve nightmares. We're past sense now. She was right. We'd left sense behind the moment I'd bitten into that Snickers bar and tasted my childhood trauma. Jason had triangulated the convergence point. Pike Place Market, just as we'd predicted. But specifically the lower levels. The part tourists rarely saw. The maze of shops and corridors that existed beneath the main market. The place where the city stored its shadows. We arrived at 4 p.m. The market was packed with Halloween celebrations. Kids in costumes. Adults pretending they weren't scared of getting older. Street performers painted like gargoyles and ghosts. Normal Seattle weird. The kind that made you smile instead of scream. But below was different. The fluorescent lights flickered with intent. The air tasted like rust and anticipation. And in a corridor that hadn't existed yesterday, 12 vending machines stood in a perfect circle. All of them brown. All of them humming. All of them waiting. Jesus, Jason whispered. I counted the machines. Did the math. If each one had been collecting fears for weeks, if each fear was growing, multiplying. How many people do you think use them? I asked. Based on the social media data, hundreds, maybe thousands. Thousands of fears, all stored, all ready to be born into something worse. The machine's displays all showed the same thing. 0 o'clock. A countdown that hadn't started yet. Or maybe one that had already ended. We should wait, Jason said. Come back when they're active. When we know. The machines turned on, all at once, all together. Their displays blazed to life. 11:59. And counting down. So much for waiting, I said. The humming intensified, harmonized. Became something that was almost music, almost words, almost screaming. I strapped on the device, my hand shook only a little. If this doesn't work, it'll work, Jason said. But he stepped back, away from the machines. Away from what was about to happen. I approached the circle. Each step felt like walking through increasingly thick air. Like the atmosphere was becoming solid. The machines watched me with their glass faces. Inside each one, I could see movement. Not snacks, not candy. Things that writhed and pressed against the glass. Things that wanted out. I stopped at the nearest machine. The handwritten sign was different now. Pay what you feared you're worth. Past tense. Like it already knew, like it had always known. I activated the device. The fear hit me like a physical force. Not water this time, not drowning. This was worse. This was the fear of feeling nothing. The terror of being empty, the horror of being unafraid in a world that required fear to navigate safely. My heart hammered. Sweat poured down my face. Every muscle tensed for flight. But there was nowhere to run from nothing. No escape from absence. I was afraid of not being afraid, and that fear made me afraid, which meant I wasn't not afraid, which meant I fed $1 into the machine. The bill disappeared with a sound like reality tearing. The machine's hum became a roar. The buttons lit up, each symbol writhing, changing, becoming something else, something worse, something impossible. I pressed B4, always B4. The snickers that had started everything, the machine screamed. Or maybe that was me. Or maybe that was the sound of paradox trying to resolve itself. The candy bar didn't fall, didn't emerge. Instead, the glass cracked, spider-webbed. Behind it, something that had been growing fat on human fear convulsed. "It's working," Jason shouted. "The loop is—" The other machines responded. Their displays went haywire, numbers that didn't exist, symbols that hurt to perceive. The circle of machines began to vibrate, shake, blur at the edges, and then they gave birth. Not one thing, not 12 things, but somehow both. A creature of absence, a thing made of the space between heartbeats. It pulled itself from the machines like taffy, stretching impossibly, a hole in the world, shaped like everyone's worst moment. I saw my uncle's pool, but also operating tables and car accidents and empty cribs and final diagnoses and every fear that had been fed to the machines over weeks or months or maybe years. All of it. All at once. All hungry. The paradox device on my wrist was smoking. Overloading. The fear of not being afraid was trying to compute itself against a thing that was all fears and no fear simultaneously. "Run!" Jason screamed. But I couldn't. Because the thing looked at me with eyes made of not eyes and spoke with a voice made of not voice. "You're the one who understands, the one who tasted truth. You can't unfear what you've already swallowed." It was right. The Snickers bar, the first taste. It was still in me, had always been in me, growing. "Marcus!" Jason was pulling at my arm. "We have to go." "No," I said. "I have to finish this." I walked into the circle of machines, into the thing that was unfolding like a nightmare origami. It didn't attack, didn't need to. I was already infected, already part of it. Had been since that first bite. But that also meant I was connected to it. Could feel its hunger, its purpose, its need to spread, to grow, to turn the world into a place where fear was the only currency and terror the only truth. And connected to it, I could feel its weakness. It was afraid, too. Afraid of being starved. Afraid of a world that didn't fear it, afraid of irrelevance. I laughed, actually laughed. Because it was funny, wasn't it? The ultimate fear was fearing it wasn't feared enough. "You're just another machine," I said. "Another broken vending machine selling expired product." It recoiled. The machine sparked, smoked, began to melt. The thing of absence began to collapse, folding in on itself like a quantum nightmare. "But you're in me," it said with its not voice. "You'll always be drowning. Always be 7 years old at the bottom of the pool. Always be—" "Yeah," I said. But now I know why. I thought about Dr. Chen's words, about Tommy's reflection, about Jason's code. Fear was pattern recognition. But patterns could be rewritten, reprogrammed, hacked. I closed my eyes, felt the water rising. But this time, I didn't fight it, didn't panic. I let it fill me, let it become me. And in becoming it, I changed it. The water wasn't water. It was just memory, just neurons firing in learned sequences, just a machine running broken code. I opened my eyes. The thing of absence was gone. The machines were puddles of melted plastic and impossible circuitry. The lower market was just a lower market. Halloween decorations and confused vendors and the smell of fish and coffee. Jason stood at the entrance to the corridor, eyes wide. "Is it over?" I checked my phone. 12:01 a.m. November 1st. The harvest had passed. The birth had been aborted. The fear had eaten itself. "Yeah," I said, "it's over." But that was a lie, because I could still taste it, still feel it moving under my tongue, the thing the machine had put in me, the fear that wasn't just fear anymore. I walked out of Pike Place Market into the Seattle night. Jason followed, asking questions I couldn't answer. The city looked normal, felt normal, but I could see the places where more machines would appear, could feel the fear building again, collecting, waiting. Because the thing about fear is it's patient, it's resourceful, and it's already inside us, growing, waiting for the next harvest. I went home, threw away the device, deleted the footage, tried to forget. But every time I pass a vending machine now, I check. Is it brown? Is it humming? Is it waiting? And sometimes, late at night when I'm half asleep and my defenses are down, I swear I can hear it. The sound of something dispensing. The thunk of a candy bar falling. The whisper of a wrapper that says things it shouldn't. Because the machines aren't really gone. They're just waiting, evolving, learning from their mistakes. They'll be back, different, smarter, hungrier, and when they come back, they won't just know our fears. They'll know our names. So, that's my story. That's what happened in Seattle last Halloween. Most people don't believe it, call it an urban legend, a creepypasta, a viral marketing campaign that got out of hand. But you believe it, don't you? You've seen them. The vending machines that shouldn't be there, that hum wrong, that sell things that aren't quite right. Maybe you've even used one. Felt that first taste of something impossible, something that's now growing inside you, patient as fear itself. If you have, if you're out there reading this, feeling that familiar crawl of recognition, know that you're not alone. We're all infected now, all carrying our own little piece of the harvest. But here's the thing they don't want you to know. The real secret, the truth that even the machines don't understand. Fear only has the power we give it, and we can take that power back, one breath at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. The vending machines will return, the harvest will come again. But maybe, just maybe, this time we'll be ready. This time we won't be afraid of our fear, we'll be afraid of the right things. Like what happens when fear realizes we don't need it anymore. Sweet dreams, Seattle. And remember, check your candy bars. Check your reflections. Check the shadows that fall just a little too dark. Because somewhere out there, a vending machine is waiting, humming its broken song, offering its impossible prices, waiting for you to pay what you fear you're worth. But don't worry. It's probably nothing, probably just a story, probably just your imagination running wild on this cozy October night. Probably. The question is, are you brave enough to find out? Are you brave enough to take that first bite? Or are you already tasting something that shouldn't be there? Something moving under your tongue? Something that tastes like chocolate and peanuts and caramel and whatever you're most afraid of. Tell me in the comments below. Share this story if it kept you up. Subscribe if you want to hear more about what's really happening in the shadows of Seattle. Because I've got more stories, more machines, more harvests, and trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. This is just the beginning. The vending machines were just the first wave. Wait until you hear about the elevator that only goes down. But that's a story for another night. Another dream, another fear. Until then, sleep tight, and whatever you do, don't use the machine. Story number 4. Picture this. You're standing in line at your local Starbucks in downtown Seattle. The barista calls your name, but when you reach for your coffee, she pulls back. Her eyes are wide, terrified. "I saw it," she whispers. "Last night, I saw what you dreamed." Now, imagine that happening every single day, with everyone you meet. That's my life now. And before you ask, no, I'm not crazy. I have proof. But first, let me ask you something. What was the last nightmare you had? Now imagine if everyone around you, your neighbors, your coworkers, even strangers on the street, they all saw it too. Would you ever sleep again? Well, stick around, because what happened to me is about to make you question every dream you've ever had. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be checking the comments to see if anyone else is experiencing what I am. Because this isn't just my story anymore. It might be yours too. All right, the story starts now. My name is David Chen, and I live in a cramped studio apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant in Portland's Jade District. The smell of pho usually lulls me to sleep. But lately, sleep has become my enemy. It started 3 weeks ago, Tuesday morning, October 15th. I remember because my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was knocking on my door at 6 a.m., which never happens. She's usually the quiet type, keeps to herself, waters her succulents on the fire escape. "David?" Her voice was shaky through the door. "David, honey, are you okay?" I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and opened the door. She stood there in her floral bathrobe, clutching her chest like she'd run a marathon. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what's wrong?" She stared at me for a long moment, then whispered, "The hallway. The endless hallway with the red doors. You were running. Something was chasing you." My blood turned to ice water. I'd had that exact dream. The hallway that stretched forever, lined with identical red doors. The thing behind me. Breathing. Getting closer. I'd woken up at 3 a.m., sheets soaked with sweat. How do you know about that?" She shook her head, backing away. "I don't know, I saw it, like I was there with you." I wanted to laugh it off. Coincidence, right? Maybe I'd been talking in my sleep. The walls in this building are paper thin, but the look in her eyes, she wasn't guessing. She knew details I hadn't said out loud. The peeling wallpaper, the flickering fluorescent lights, the way each door had a number that didn't make sense. 7B, 23F, 91X. I called in sick to work that day. Spent hours Googling, shared dreams, and dream telepathy. Found nothing but New Age websites and Reddit threads that led nowhere. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself it was a fluke. Then I went to the corner store for milk. The kid behind the counter couldn't have been older than 19. Took one look at me and dropped the scanner. It clattered on the floor, but he didn't pick it up. Just stared. "You're him," he said. "The guy from the hallway dream." My hands started shaking. "You saw it too?" He nodded slowly. "Last night, you were there, running. There was this thing behind you. Couldn't see it clearly, but I could hear it. Sounded like wet leather being dragged across concrete," I finished. His face went pale. "Yeah, exactly." I left without the milk. That night, I tried not to sleep. Mainlined coffee, did jumping jacks, even held my eyes open like some cartoon character. But exhaustion always wins. Around 4 a.m., I drifted off at my kitchen table, face pressed against my laptop keyboard. The dream was different this time. I was in my childhood home in Eugene, the one we'd sold after Dad died. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The crooked family photos on the stairs, the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a rabbit, even the smell, that mix of lemon pledge and my mom's lavender candles. But something was wrong. The photos, the faces were all blurred out, and there was someone in the living room, sitting in Dad's old recliner, back to me. "Dad?" My voice came out small, like I was 8 years old again. The figure didn't turn, just sat there, shoulders rising and falling with each breath. I walked closer. My feet felt like they were moving through molasses. Reached out to touch the shoulder. The head snapped around. It wasn't my dad, it was me, an older version of me, maybe 60 or 70, with hollow eyes and a mouth that opened too wide, like a snake unhinging its jaw. "You're broadcasting," it said in a voice like grinding gears. "Everyone can see. Everyone knows what you really are." I woke up screaming. The next morning was worse. My downstairs neighbor, Jake, was waiting in the hallway. So was Mrs. Rodriguez, and Tom from 4B. Even the building super, Mr. Petrov, stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed. "We need to talk," Jake said. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes like he'd been punched. About the dreams. They'd all had it, the house in Eugene, the blurred photos, the thing in the chair. Every single detail matched. "This is insane," I said, backing toward my door. "Mass hallucination or something. Carbon monoxide leak, maybe?" Mr. Petrov shook his head. "I had detector checked yesterday. Is not gas. Is you." Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, and I noticed her hands were trembling. "David, honey, this isn't the first time. I've been seeing your dreams for days. Little flashes at first. A face here, a feeling there, but now," she swallowed hard, "now it's like being inside your head. We can feel what you feel," Tom added. "In the dreams. Your fear, your confusion, it's like it's our own." I wanted to run, lock myself in my apartment and never come out. But where could I go? If this was real, if I was somehow broadcasting my dreams like some kind of psychic radio station, then nowhere was safe. "Has anyone else noticed?" I asked. "Outside the building." Jake nodded grimly. "My girlfriend, she doesn't live here, but she stayed over 2 nights ago. Had the same dreams. Said she felt like she was drowning in someone else's memories." The hallway felt too small suddenly. Too many eyes on me. Too many people who'd seen inside my head. Inside the places I kept locked away even from myself. "I need to figure this out," I said. "I need to make it stop." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. You can't control your dreams. And if I couldn't control them, then neither could anyone else who got caught in the broadcast. I started keeping a dream journal. Not for myself. I remembered every twisted detail anyway. But to track the spread. Like mapping a virus. Day 4. My entire apartment building, plus 3 people at the coffee shop across the street. Day 7. Half a city block. The mailman started avoiding my route. The elderly couple next door moved in with their daughter. Day 10. I got a call from my boss. "Chen, I don't know what's going on with you, but half the office is complaining about nightmares. Sarah from accounting says she saw you in her dream last night. Something about drowning in an ocean of paper while you just watched. What the hell is happening?" I hung up without answering. What could I say? That my subconscious was leaking out like radiation from a cracked reactor? The dreams themselves were getting worse. Not just nightmares now, memories too. Things I'd buried the day I found my goldfish floating belly up when I was 6. My first girlfriend, Melissa, laughing as she told me she'd been seeing my best friend. The sound of the heart monitor when Dad... No, I couldn't think about that. Because thinking about it during the day meant dreaming about it at night. And dreaming about it meant sharing it with everyone in range. I tried everything. Sleeping pills made the dreams more vivid. Meditation apps just gave my brain more material to twist into nightmares. I even bought one of those dream catchers from a shop in Chinatown. The owner took one look at me and refused to sell me anything else. "Your spirit is too loud," she'd said in broken English. "Cannot be caught. Only spreads." By week 2, I was a pariah. People crossed the street when they saw me coming. My local grocery store banned me after 3 cashiers quit, claiming they couldn't handle the night terrors. Even delivery drivers started leaving food at the bottom of the stairs. The loneliness was almost worse than the exhaustion. Almost. Then I met Luna. She was sitting on the steps of my building at 3 a.m., smoking a cigarette that smelled like cloves. Purple hair, beat-up leather jacket, eyes lined with enough black to stock a art store. Not the kind of person you usually see in my neighborhood. "You're David," she said, not a question. I stopped, keys halfway to the lock. "If you're here to complain about the dreams, I'm here because of them." She took a long drag, then crushed the cigarette under her combat boot. "I've been having them for 2 weeks. Drove here from San Francisco just to find you." San Francisco? I did the math. That's over 600 miles. She shrugged. "Yeah, well, when you start dreaming someone else's life every night, you get curious. Plus," she stood, and I noticed she was taller than me. "Your dreams are interesting. Horrifying, sure, but interesting." "Interesting," I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Lady, my dreams are destroying people's lives, my own included." "Luna," she corrected. "And yeah, they're intense. But haven't you wondered why this is happening? Why now? Why you?" I had wondered, every waking moment. "And you have answers?" "No, but I have theories." She pulled out a worn notebook, pages covered in cramped handwriting. "I've been tracking patterns. The range isn't just expanding, it's following specific paths. Ley lines, some might call them, old energy pathways. You're talking about magic. I'm talking about something we don't understand yet." She flipped through pages. "Look, every person who's reported your dreams, they're all connected somehow. Not obviously, but your neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez? Her grandmother lived in the same town as your great-uncle. That kid at the corner store? His family bought their house from your dad's cousin 20 years ago." My head spun. How do you even know all this?" "Because I've been dreaming your memories, remember? Names, places, connections. It's all in there. Your subconscious knows things your conscious mind's forgotten." She snapped the notebook shut. "The question is, what's the connection? What's the pattern?" I stared at her, this stranger who'd driven 10 hours because of my nightmares, who was looking at me like I was a puzzle to solve instead of a freak to avoid. "Why do you care?" I asked. She smiled, and it was sharp as broken glass. "Because I've been having my own weird dreams my whole life. Never found anyone else who understood. Until I started having yours." She stepped closer. "So what do you say, David Chen? Want to figure out why you're Portland's worst neighbor?" What choice did I have? I was desperate, exhausted, and despite everything, curious. If there was a reason for this, a pattern, maybe there was also a solution. "Fine," I said. "But we work on this at night. During the day, I need to stay away from people." "Deal." She held out a hand. "Partners?" I shook it, her grip firm and cold. "Partners." Luna set up what she called a research station in my apartment. Maps of Portland covered in red pins, genealogy websites bookmarked on my laptop, coffee strong enough to strip paint. "Tell me about the first dream," she said, cross-legged on my floor at 4 a.m. The hallway. Every detail. I closed my eyes, remembering. Endless corridor, red doors, each with a wrong number, peeling wallpaper, yellow, with a pattern like eyes, she finished. "I know, I've seen it. But what triggered it? What happened that day?" I thought back, October 14th. Nothing special, work, home, leftover Thai food. Watched some Netflix. Which show? Does it matter? Everything matters. She was already typing. Dreams don't come from nowhere. They're responses, reactions. Some documentary about serial killers, I think. The Night Stalker. Her fingers paused. Richard Ramirez broke into people's homes through unlocked doors and windows. She looked up at me. Red doors. The thing chasing you. Your subconscious turned your fear of invasion into a literal nightmare. Okay, but that doesn't explain why everyone else saw it. No, she agreed. But it's a start. We worked backwards through every dream I could remember. Luna took notes like a detective, finding connections I'd never noticed. The drowned goldfish dream came after I'd walked past a pet store. The girlfriend nightmare followed a Facebook notification about Melissa's wedding. You're hypersensitive, Luna concluded after 3 nights of investigation. Your brain takes tiny emotional triggers and amplifies them into full sensory experiences, but that still doesn't explain the broadcasting. She was sprawled on my couch, surrounded by empty energy drink cans. I sat at the kitchen table, fighting to stay awake. Outside, the city was quiet except for the occasional siren. Maybe I'm just broken, I said. A glitch in the matrix. Nobody's just anything. She sat up, eyes bright despite the hour. What about your family? Anyone else with weird dreams? Psychic aunts? Prophetic grandmothers? My family doesn't talk about stuff like that. Mine either. Chinese? Half. Mom's side. I rubbed my eyes. Dad was Irish. They met at U of O. What did they do for work? Mom was a nurse, Dad. I hesitated. Even after 5 years, it hurt to talk about him. Dad taught physics, quantum mechanics specifically. Luna went very still. Quantum mechanics. Yeah, used to joke that he worked with invisible things that were everywhere and nowhere at once. I smiled despite myself. Said consciousness was just another quantum field waiting to be measured. David. Her voice was strange. Careful. What happened to your dad? Brain tumor, inoperable. I swallowed hard. He had weird episodes near the end. Said he could feel other people's thoughts, see their memories. The doctors said it was the tumor pressing on his temporal lobe. Luna was already at my laptop, fingers flying. What was his name? Full name. Patrick Chen. Why? She spun the screen toward me. An old academic paper filled the browser. The title made my blood run cold. Quantum Entanglement and Consciousness. Theoretical Framework for Non-Local Mental Phenomena by Dr. Patrick Chen and Dr. Elizabeth Reeves. Your dad was studying this, Luna breathed. The idea that consciousness could exist as a quantum field, that thoughts and dreams might not be confined to individual brains. I stared at the screen, seeing my father's name in print. He never talked about this research. Mom never mentioned it. Look at the date, Luna pointed. Published 3 months before his diagnosis, and his co-author, she opened another tab. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves died in a car accident the same year. Single car, ran off the road, no explanation. The room felt colder suddenly. You're saying what? That my dad discovered something, that it killed him? I'm saying maybe his tumor wasn't random. Maybe whatever he was studying. She trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Maybe it changed him. Maybe it's changing me. I found the box in the back of my closet. Mom had given it to me after the funeral. Dad's office things she couldn't bear to throw away. I'd never opened it. Inside, notebooks filled with equations I couldn't understand. Printed emails with half the text redacted. And at the bottom, a flash drive labeled QCP, Final. Quantum Consciousness Project, Luna guessed. The drive was password protected. I tried birthdays, anniversaries, my name. Nothing. Then, on a hunch, I typed the number from my recurring nightmare. 7B23F91X. It worked. The files that loaded made my head spin. Videos of experiments, brain scans showing impossible patterns, and a journal, Dad's private research notes. Entry 47. The field is stronger than we thought. Elizabeth achieved full projection last night. Subjects 3 buildings away reported identical dream sequences. We're on to something extraordinary. Entry 52. Side effects increasing. Headaches, nosebleeds. E says we should stop, but we're so close. The implications for human connection, for understanding consciousness itself. Entry 61. Something's wrong. The field won't turn off. Even awake, I can feel others around me, their thoughts bleeding through. E wants to destroy the research. Maybe she's right. Entry 64. E is dead. They say accident, but I know better. The tumors have started. 3 months, maybe 6. I've hidden the prototype. If anyone finds this, if my son... God, I'm sorry, David. I'm so sorry. I looked up from the screen to find Luna watching me, her face unreadable. He built something, I said. A device that amplifies consciousness, projects it. She nodded slowly, and either it's still running somewhere, or it changed him permanently, and he passed it on to me. We sat in silence as the weight of it settled. My father, the practical physics professor who'd taught me to ride a bike and make perfect scrambled eggs, had discovered something science said was impossible, and it had killed him. Now it was killing me, one sleepless night at a time. We need to find it, Luna said. The prototype. If your dad hid it, he's been dead 5 years. Mom sold the house. It could be anywhere. Or... She pulled up the dream journal I'd been keeping. It could be somewhere your subconscious already knows. Look at your recurring dreams. The hallway, the house in Eugene. What else keeps coming back? I scanned the entries. There was one, a storage unit. Endless rows of identical blue doors under flickering lights. I always woke up before I could open any of them. Storage unit, I said. But I don't have... I stopped. After Dad died, Mom had mentioned something about a unit he'd rented, for old equipment from the university. She'd paid for another year, too grief-stricken to deal with it, then... She forgot about it, I whispered. Mom forgot, but the payments, they'd be automatic. Luna was already pulling up storage facilities near the university. Blue doors? Yeah, got it. Secure store on Franklin Boulevard. Matches your description exactly. It was 5 a.m. The sun wouldn't rise for another 2 hours. Perfect time for breaking and entering. The facility was deserted except for a security guard who barely looked up from his phone. Luna had found Dad's unit number in the files. 303. We walked the endless corridors, our footsteps echoing off concrete. This is it, I said, recognizing the scratch on the door from my dreams. My hands shook as I entered the combination. My parents' anniversary. Inside, boxes of dusty equipment, old computers, oscilloscopes, and in the back, covered by a tarp, something else. It looked like a helmet had mated with a satellite dish. Wires ran from it to a car battery, and the whole thing hummed faintly, LEDs blinking in sequence. It's still on, Luna breathed. After 5 years, it's still running. I stared at my father's invention, the thing that had killed him, the thing that was destroying my life. How do we turn it off? She studied the connections. I don't think we can, not without understanding how it works. And David, she looked up at me. What if turning it off doesn't fix you? What if you're permanently changed? I thought about the expanding radius of my dreams, the people fleeing their homes, the jobs lost, relationships destroyed. Then we contain it, lead line the thing, bury it, something. Or, her voice was thoughtful, we figure out how to control it. Control it, Luna? This thing is a nightmare machine. No, it's a consciousness amplifier. Your dad's notes said Elizabeth achieved full projection, controlled broadcasting. She ran her fingers over the helmet portion. What if the nightmares aren't the intended result? What if they're just feedback, uncontrolled transmission? I wanted to argue, but something in her eyes stopped me. That hungry look, like she was seeing possibilities I couldn't imagine. "You want to study it," I said. "Experiment with it. I want to understand it, don't you?" She turned to face me fully. "Your father discovered something incredible. Something that proves consciousness isn't confined to our skulls, that we're all connected in ways science is just beginning to grasp. It killed him, because they didn't know what they were dealing with. But we do now. We have his notes, his experience, your experience." She stepped closer. "David, you're living proof that human consciousness can transcend physical boundaries. Do you know what that means?" I did. It meant I was a freak, a transmitter of nightmares, a walking violation of everything we thought we knew about how minds worked. But it also meant, "If I can broadcast nightmares," I said slowly, "then, theoretically, you could broadcast anything. Memories, ideas, emotions." Her eyes were bright with possibility. "Imagine being able to truly share an experience with someone. Not just describe it, but let them feel it, see it, live it. Or imagine weaponizing it, driving people insane with targeted nightmares." She nodded. "That too, which is why we need to understand it, control it, before someone else figures out what's happening and decides to study you in a less friendly way." The humming of the machine seemed louder suddenly. I could feel it resonating in my bones, in the place behind my eyes where dreams formed. "What do you propose?" I asked. "We take it, study it somewhere safe, run controlled experiments." She paused. "Together, I help you understand what's happening to you, maybe even control it. You help me understand this." She gestured at the machine. "Deal?" I looked at the device that had destroyed my father's life. Then at Luna, this strange woman who'd driven 600 miles because of my dreams, who saw possibility where everyone else saw horror. What choice did I have? The dreams weren't stopping. The radius kept expanding. Soon, half of Portland would be inside my head every night. "Deal," I said. "But if this goes wrong, it's already wrong, David. We're just trying to make it right." We loaded the device into Luna's van as the sun rose over Portland. The security guard didn't even look up as we drove away, carrying a machine that defied the laws of physics in the back of a beat-up Ford. "Where to?" I asked. "I know a place. Cabin in the mountains. Isolated, no neighbors for miles." And then, she glanced at me, a smile playing at her lips. "Then we figure out what you really are, David Chen, and what you might become." As we drove out of the city, I felt the weight of exhaustion settling over me. I'd have to sleep soon, dream again, broadcast again. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't entirely afraid. Maybe Luna was right. Maybe this wasn't just a curse. Maybe it was evolution, the next step in human consciousness. Or maybe we were about to make everything much, much worse. I wouldn't know until tonight, when the dreams came again, when my mind reached out across impossible distances to touch other sleeping souls. But this time, I wouldn't be alone. This time, someone would be watching, studying, learning. The machine hummed in the back of the van, keeping time with my heartbeat. My father's legacy, my inheritance, my curse and possibly my gift. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me. And somewhere in Portland, 100 people stirred in their beds as my dreams began to broadcast once more. But this time, mixed with the usual nightmares, was something new. Hope. As we drove into the mountains, the radio crackled with strange reports. Mass shared dreams across the Pacific Northwest. Scientists baffled. Religious groups claiming the end times. And in the middle of it all, me, David Chen, the man whose dreams had become everyone's problem, but also, perhaps, everyone's possibility. The road stretched ahead, winding into forests where no one would hear us experiment, where no one would feel the ripples of consciousness spreading like rings in water. I looked at Luna, her purple hair catching the morning light. What if we can't control it? What if it just keeps getting stronger? She met my eyes in the rearview mirror. Then, we better figure it out fast, because David? She smiled, and it was both reassuring and terrifying. I don't think you're the only one. Your dad's research. There were other test subjects, other prototypes, and if your range keeps expanding, she didn't need to finish. If there were others like me out there, eventually our fields would overlap. And when they did, I thought about the world's dreams colliding, merging. 7 billion minds suddenly connected in ways they'd never been before. It would be beautiful. It would be chaos. It would be evolution, I whispered. Luna nodded. Or extinction. Depends on how well we learn to swim in the collective unconscious. The machine hummed its electric lullaby as we disappeared into the trees. Behind us, Portland woke to shared nightmares and impossible memories. Ahead of us, answers waited in a cabin where we'd either learn to control the future of human consciousness or lose our minds trying. My name is David Chen. My dreams are broadcasting to everyone around me, and I'm just getting started. So, did you feel it? That little tingle at the back of your mind while reading this? That sense that maybe, just maybe, you've seen that red-doored hallway in your own dreams? Check the comments below. See if anyone else near you had strange dreams last night. Because the thing about consciousness fields, they don't care about the difference between fiction and reality. They just care about connection. And if you've read this far, well, we're connected now, aren't we? Sweet dreams. Or should I say, our dreams. Leave a comment if you've been having shared dreams lately. Like and subscribe if you want to hear what happens when David's field finally overlaps with another broadcaster. Because, trust me, that story, it's even stranger than this one. And remember, every time you dream tonight, ask yourself, is this mine or is someone else bleeding through? Until next time, sleep tight.